Marty and Mary Kate Thomas own Cockadoodle Farm, a chicken farm located about 45 minutes south of Chicago. In 2024, their farm had 3,000 hens. In the first weeks of January 2025, the temperatures plummeted to single digits Fahrenheit, freezing the water lines going to the three coops. One morning, some of the workers found 30 dead chickens in one of the coops and reported it to Marty. When he arrived to see what was going on, he just thought they froze to death, which is not anything that's out of the ordinary. And he told the workers to keep an eye on the water lines to make sure they were flowing and to help prevent them from prevent more from freezing to death. The next day, as he headed down to the coops, he saw one of the farm workers walking out of the coop with her arms full of chickens, all of them dead. Warning, there is about to be a picture of dead chickens in case you wish to look away. Over 100 more chickens had died overnight. While walking through the coop, Marty saw that many more hens were alive, but just barely. He had no idea what was going on. They were listless, too weak to stand or walk, and only stirred when they were picked up. Even though he didn't know what was going on, he knew that they were clearly sick, and he knew what he had to do with them. He stepped out of the coop, picked up an axe, and headed back in. A few days before their chickens started dying, the Thomases were warned by a neighboring farmer that bird flu was spreading in southern Illinois. Mary Kate began to worry about all the wild birds that were in the pastures where the chickens roamed and that pecked at the chickens' feed, but she realized there's just things you can't control. There was no way to keep the flock completely isolated. As Marty picked up dead chicken after dead chicken, he wasn't thinking about bird flu. There were so many dead, but they didn't have any of the obvious signs of the virus. No difficulty breathing, no nasal discharge, no low egg production, nothing. He contacted his vet, and the vet agreed, thinking it was just the cold that killed him. This was especially considering the newest and most advanced coop appeared to be completely unaffected. But 2 days later, there were dead chickens in all three of the coops. At this point, the Thomases notified the state agricultural department and soon got a call from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, or USDA. They wanted to visit the farm immediately to collect some of the birds for testing. By the time they arrived, which was a week after the first chickens died, 2,500 of the 3,000 birds were dead. The picture of the dead birds has been taken down. A few hours later, they got the call. The chickens were positive for bird flu. The next morning, the USDA would be coming back to kill the remaining chickens. In less than a week, the Cockadoodle farm went from 3,000 healthy chickens to 3,000 dead chickens, and the farm being quarantined for 150 days. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Dr. Jeremy. I'm the Everyday Epidemiologist. Today, we're going to talk about avian influenza, commonly known as bird flu. But before we get into that, a few quick disclaimers. First, I'm not a medical doctor. Nothing in this video is medical advice. Any medical advice you want or need should be obtained from your physician. Second, this information is being brought to you by me alone as someone who knows a bit about public health. It is not coming in any sort of official capacity from the health department where I work. Third, all the information provided in this video comes from publicly accessible websites, books, and research articles. The sources are in the description of the video and in the pinned comment. Fourth, I try to provide as accurate and scientifically based information as possible. However, I may misspeak or say something that is incorrect and unintentionally. If you catch me on this, please leave a comment with what I said wrong, and if possible, a source to the correct information, and I will look into it. If I was wrong, I'll provide the correct information in a future video. Another warning, there will be pictures of sick or dead animals in this presentation. If you are squeamish, you may wish to look away. I will try to tell you when they will be shown on screen and when they've been taken down. If I forget and miss one, I'm sorry. I will stop periodically for questions throughout the stream. However, feel free to type any questions you may have in the chat at any point, and I will answer them as I see them. If we're watching later on the VOD, please leave your questions in the comments and I'll answer them ASAP. So, without further ado, let's talk about avian influenza. Avian influenza, or as it is commonly known, bird flu, is primarily a respiratory disease that primarily affects, as the name suggests, birds. Wild water birds such as gulls, terns, shorebirds, ducks, geese, and swans are the natural hosts for this virus, but it can infect other birds as well. There have been more than 100 species of wild birds worldwide that have been confirmed to be affected by bird flu. Some of these include pelicans, cormorants, some songbirds such as sparrows, pigeons, and crows. But it isn't just wild birds, but domesticated birds as well that can be infected, such as chickens and turkeys. As bad as this is, birds are not the only animal that can be infected. Here is a list of animal species that were identified with bird flu between May of 2022 and January of 2026 in the US alone. Bears, domestic cats, langomorphs, such as rabbits and hares, marine mammals such as dolphins, seals, sea lions, mustelids such as weasels, otters, and badgers, raccoons, rodents, skunks, opossums, wild dogs, and wild cats. Oh yeah, and it can also infect people. So while this list is huge, it is likely that it is still an incomplete list of all the animals that can and have caught bird flu. Now that we know what it can infect, what exactly is infecting all of these animals? Avian influenza is caused by, surprise, surprise, an influenza virus. There are 4 types of influenza viruses: A, B, C, and D. Influenza A and B are the 2 that circulate in humans and cause the seasonal flu epidemics. Influenza A is the one that has the most potential to cause serious global pandemics. Influenza C can but does not often infect people and typically causes relatively minor symptoms. Influenza D primarily affects cattle, but can on rare occasions infect humans and other animals. Since B, C, and D lineages don't cause bird flu, I won't be talking about those anymore here. Influenza A viruses are divided into subtypes based on the type of 2 different proteins that are present on the surface of the virus. These proteins are called, okay, let's see if I can say it without stumbling over these words. Hemagglutinin, nope, I failed that one. Hemagglutinin and neuraminidase. Neuraminidase, something like that. Yeah, that one. We'll call them the H protein and N protein basically from here on out. So yeah, there are 18 types of the H proteins called H1 through H18. I know, very original. And there are 11 types of the N protein known as, you guessed it, N1 through N11. Those are the ones that we know of, at least. There might be more out there, but those are the ones that we have identified. We identify the type of influenza based on the combination of these 2 proteins and name the strain after that. As far as I know, any H protein can combine with any N protein. So you could get things like H1N1, H1N2, H3N8, H16N1, H12N10, etc., etc., etc. Viruses with the H1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, and 11, or the N1 through 9 proteins can affect people. Yeah, that's most of them. I know. It sucks. So now that we have the generic influenza information out of the way, we can focus on bird flu specifically. Avian influenza is further classified as either low pathogenic avian influenza, or LPAI, or highly pathogenic avian influenza, or HPAI. LPAI viruses cause either no signs of disease or very mild symptoms in birds. They can, however, mutate into HPA viruses. HPAI, on the other hand, are nasty. They cause severe disease and a very high mortality rate in birds. Only some strains of H5 and H7 type influenzas are HPAI. Most H5, H7, and all H6, 9, and H10 viruses are LPAI, so very mild. So what's the difference between LPAI and HPAI? And why the difference in severity? That's a great question. Thank you for asking. I only found one paper investigating this, and it suggests that it's potentially due to where exactly the virus is attacking, as well as the type and strength of the immune response to that particular virus. But it wasn't overly clear, and I'm not sure if we really know. I couldn't find any other information saying anything else, so that's what I'm going with. There are 5 variants of avian influenza that have infected people. These are H5, H6, H7, H9, and H10, with the most frequently identified strains being H5, H7, and H9. Influenza A H5N1 and Influenza A H7N9 have caused a majority of the avian influenza A cases in people. There have been other strains such as H5N6, H9N2, H6N1, H7N2, H10N3, H10N7, and H10N8 that have been identified in humans. If you want to learn more about the strains of avian influenza, it's kind of interesting, but you can check out the link on this screen. It goes into a lot of good information about the different strains and what can infect people, what can't, and all that good stuff. So, with all that information out of the way as to what it is, what it looks like, or what it is, what causes it, and all that, I think this is a good point for a quick stop to see if you have any questions. After this, we will go over the symptoms, how it spreads, and how it's treated. So, what questions about avian influenza do you have at this point of what I've already covered, or that you want me to cover in the future? And let's see, howdy everyone in the chat. We've got Sarah, Big Fat Snake, Mare, and Whisper all here. How y'all doing? Mare says, hey Sarah, I see you're looking at all kind of streams to see what sicknesses you have. I don't think it's bird flu though. Yeah, let's hope not. Let's hope not. And it's probably not. Bird flu is pretty nasty disease. And Whisper, no problem about the late arrival. Appreciate you being here. So, do y'all have any questions about bird flu at this point? Or are you just waiting to see what I'm going to cover? That might be it. Is the U.S. importing eggs from Turkey due to the flu in the USA? You read about something about that a while ago. I don't know. I think I did read something about that, but I'm not sure. Let's see what I can find real quick. Turkey. Let's see. Turn this on. So it looks like at one point we did. Maybe we still are. This is an article from March 2025. Looks like we did start importing some eggs from Turkey and from South Korea to help lower the prices. I don't know if that's still going on, but yeah, it looks like that is the case. Absolutely. Interesting. Interesting. Didn't know that. Oh, I didn't know that for sure. As I said, I remembered hearing something about it, but I wasn't positive. That's not the one I want to know if that's the one. Sarah. Now, the farm mentioned at the beginning, did this only affect the chickens on that farm, and did it only stay with the birds? So that farm only had chickens. So that was just a chicken farm. So, and as far as I know, none of the people tested positive. None of the articles I saw talked about any human cases from that. But I don't know. I don't know. And it was likely affecting other farms in the area as well. I mean, in the past couple of years, we'll get into a bit more detail of this later on, but in the past couple of years, especially in the US, avian influenza has been everywhere and affecting a lot of people, and a lot of farms, a lot of chicken farms, a lot of turkey farms, and a lot of dairy farms. But I don't know. I don't know about this particular incident, if it went beyond the birds. Whisper, you're guessing the mortality rate is fairly low, at least among humans. We will talk about that more later, but basically, well, if you become hospitalized, if you have a severe enough disease that you need to be hospitalized, no, very high mortality rates, up to about 50%. But that's only among people that are hospitalized. That does not include people who have no symptoms or very minor symptoms and don't seek medical treatment. So we don't really know exactly the full mortality rate, but it is pretty high. It is pretty high. It's higher than your normal seasonal flu. We'll put it that way. But how exactly, or how high exactly, I don't think we really have a good judge on that. Yeah, Snake, it looks like it was mostly to keep the prices down, because egg prices got really high here when all our birds were dying, or just not laying as effectively because they were all sick. The US has lost about 58 million birds to HPAI since 2022. Yeah, yeah. I think I do have a number like that later on, but yeah, it's huge. It's huge. The US has been hit really hard the past couple of years. But we are not the only country that has been hit hard. And I'll go over some of the other recent outbreaks and some of the history of avian influenza later on. So yeah, good questions. Good questions. So I'm going to go ahead and move on. But if you have any other questions, again, feel free to put them in the chat and I will answer them as I see them, or I may answer them as I go through the talk. But let's move on. So what does avian influenza look like? In this section, I will discuss some of the symptoms in birds as well as symptoms in humans. Warning, there will be some pictures of sick chickens in this, including one that's coming up right now. Describing the symptoms in birds is a bit complicated because it depends on the exact strain of the virus, whether it's HPAI or LPAI, and what kind of bird it is. LPAI infections in birds typically result in respiratory symptoms, if anything. These include sneezing, coughing, eye and nasal discharge, swelling of the sinuses, and lesions in the respiratory tract. Inflammation of the sinus tissues is commonly seen in ducks, quails, and domestic turkeys, and ducks can sometimes develop cloudy eyes. In birds that are breeding and laying eggs, you can also see decreased egg production, infertility, mucosal edema, and fluid leakage from the oviduct, and rarely acute renal failure. The mortality rate of LPAI, or the number of infected birds that die, is quite low, but I couldn't find the exact numbers, but it is fairly low. HPAI infections result in much more severe symptoms. However, these symptoms may not always be visible before they kill the bird. These symptoms can include cyanosis or blue coloring and edema or swelling due to water retention of the head, comb, wattle, and snood. Also seen is ischemic necrosis of the comb, wattle, or hairnet. This is where blood flow and thus oxygen supply to the body part is blocked, causing cell death and tissue damage. Edema, bruising, and red discoloration can occur on the calves and feet of the birds. Petechial hemorrhages, or small pinpoint spots of bleeding on the muscles and organs, can occur. Severely sick birds commonly have a greenish diarrhea. They may develop central nervous system involvement, including torticollis, where the head muscle or where the neck muscles cause the head to tilt and rotate, sort of like that. Incoordination, paralysis, drooping wings, and another word I'm going to stumble over, episthotonosis. Episthotonosis, which is a severe arching of the back due to muscle spasms. Between 75 and 100% of birds affected by HPAI will die from the disease. The picture of the sick and dead birds has been taken down. Now that we have bird symptoms out of the way, let's talk about what this disease looks like in humans. Some people don't have symptoms at all, but if you do, the symptoms usually start between 1 and 5 days after infection, but can show up a little bit later. And they appear basically as your typical flu symptoms. These symptoms typically last between 3 and 4 days and include cough, sore throat, runny or stuffed nose, muscle and body aches, headache, fatigue, eye redness and irritation, and a fever, typically 100 degrees Fahrenheit or 37.8 degrees Celsius or higher. Less commonly, you can have diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, or bleeding gums. Some people get these mild symptoms. Others, however, rapidly progress to more severe symptoms. These can include a very high fever, difficulty breathing, pneumonia, acute respiratory distress syndrome, neurological symptoms including altered consciousness and seizure, myocarditis, encephalopathy, septic shock, thrombocytopenia or low white blood cell counts, and systemic inflammation. In the most severe cases, the disease progresses yet further to multi-organ failure, including kidney and liver dysfunction and heart failure. This often results in death. These more severe symptoms are more likely to occur in people with other risk factors like immunological disease, kidney failure, heart and lung disease, and those that smoke. In infected people that require hospitalization, the mortality rate of influenza is over 50%, but it depends on the strain. H7N9 infections appear to have a lower mortality rate of about 40% compared to about 52% of those infected with the H5N1 strain. However, it should be noted that this is just of people that are hospitalized and doesn't include people with mild symptoms or no symptoms that may not seek medical care. So the actual mortality rate of avian influenza is likely a good deal lower than this. Let's see. You're talking about the prices of eggs. In Sweden and Norway, it's very expensive, about $5 for a dozen. And in Denmark, I don't know where I saw Sweden. Yeah, in Norway, it's about $5 for a dozen. In Denmark, it's $3 to $4 in the US. Yeah, it's about $5 a dozen, I believe. I don't buy eggs. I don't eat eggs, so I don't really know. But yeah, all these chicken deaths have caused fewer egg production. Yeah, no one's mentioned Sweden. I know. I just see things sometimes. I don't know. um, but yeah, eggs have gotten expensive, and this is a large part of the reason why. All right, so how does this virus spread from animal to animal or from animal to person? And does it spread from person to person? As I mentioned, avian influenza is a respiratory disease, and it spreads as most respiratory diseases spread. Between birds, it spreads mostly through contaminated saliva, respiratory droplets from when they cough or sneeze, and through feces. This can be spread even if the birds don't show symptoms. Wild birds can spread the virus to domestic birds like chickens and turkeys by eating from their food and dropping their feces in the yard where the domestic birds roam. Unfortunately, this virus spreads very quickly and very easily among birds. It spreads from birds to mammals and from mammal to mammal in similar ways. Avian influenza can be transmitted from animal to people through mostly similar ways that it spreads between birds. In order for people to become infected, they need to have direct contact with an infected bird or animal, or with contaminated surfaces, also called fomites, or contaminated animal byproducts such as feces or milk. If you are in an enclosed area with infected animals, you can catch it from the air by infected droplets or dust particles that are floating around. Note, you cannot get this virus from eating cooked meat or eggs or drinking pasteurized milk. So if you drink pasteurized milk and if you cook your meat and cook your eggs, you're good. You don't need to worry about your food. You can't get it from that. Cannot. That being said, you can catch it from eating raw food, especially raw milk and raw milk products. This is yet another reason why you should not drink raw milk. Do not follow what RFK Jr. says. Raw milk is dangerous and should not be consumed. I'll say that one more time for emphasis. Raw milk is dangerous and should not be consumed. Raw milk has been shown to be a risk factor for transmission of bird flu to humans and to domestic cats. People that are at highest risk for catching avian influenza are poultry workers, dairy workers, other livestock workers, anyone involved in poultry culling or handling sick or dead wild birds, people that handle raw milk or other contaminated or potentially contaminated materials. Sorry about that. Had a little bit of a hiccup there. Slaughterhouse workers, veterinary staff, zoo and other wild animal facility workers, backyard flock owners, and hunters of wild birds and waterfowl. Avian influenza can spread from person to person. It has happened. But luckily, it is very rare, and only limited spread in this way has been observed. In most historical human-to-human transmission, it has been when there's been prolonged exposure, such as a family member caring for someone who is sick with bird flu. At this point, sustained human-to-human transmission does not occur. Let's hope it stays that way. So, now that we know what causes it, what the symptoms are, and how it spreads, what treatments are available should someone become sick. Once again, we'll start with the treatment of birds. All right, not that bird. Wasn't sure if I had a, nope, that's, stop. What are you doing? My pictures got all messed up. We'll get back there. Yeah, I think this is where I was. All right. So, once again, we'll start with the treatment of birds. And unfortunately, there isn't much that really can be done for the birds that are infected. Antivirals are not approved or recommended. Antibiotics can be given to control potential secondary bacterial infections, but they will not treat the avian influenza itself. Antibiotics do not treat viruses. Other than that, it's basically just supportive care. And this can include increasing the temperature of the birdhouses and providing fluids and supplemental feedings in the hopes of decreasing mortality rates. But this should only be done in LPAI infected flocks. The only other remaining treatment for affected poultry flocks is to kill the flock to prevent further spread. It sucks, but unfortunately it needs to be done. Treatment in humans is similar to the care and treatment of any other flu infection. First off, I want to remind you that this is not medical advice, and any treatment you need should be provided by your healthcare provider. People who become symptomatic for bird flu should be treated with the antiviral drug called oseltamivir, also known as Tamiflu. People who are immunocompromised or hospitalized with more severe disease can receive treatment with multiple antiviral drugs such as oseltamivir and baloxavir. Physicians might also prescribe peramivir, also known as rapivib, or zanamivir, also known as Brilinza. First of all, I want to take a quick second. Who the heck has named these stupid drugs like this? Why? Why do they make it so difficult? Yeah, exactly, Whisper. Why? Why are these drugs so dumb? The drug names so dumb. Make it simple. Come on, people. Come on. Anyway, back to avian influenza. All of these drugs are prescription drugs and must be provided by a physician and cannot be obtained over the counter. But beyond that, as with birds, supportive care is the only thing that can be done. Drink plenty of fluids, try to eat well, and get plenty of rest. So now that you know all about avian influenza, let's take a quick break and answer any other questions you may have at this point. After that, I'll talk a bit about the history of avian influenza outbreaks, particularly those that have caused human infections. Then I'll end with the public health response and how we are working to prevent these outbreaks and human infections. So, what questions about avian influenza do you have at this point? Snake says they come from the Latin. Maybe, I don't know. Partly because they can trademark because of trademark and copyright compliances. Well, I mean, they could trademark and copyright easy sounding words. They don't have to be so complicated. How does it travel? I assume you mean how do these outbreaks spread from like one area of the world to another, Sarah? So I'm going to answer that, and if that's not what you want, let me know in the comments, and I'll try to answer your clarified question. That is what you want. Perfect. Wild birds. Wild birds migrate. Migratory birds. Let me pull something up. Let's see if we can find the picture that I wanted. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. This is a good picture. So this picture shows the migratory flyways or migratory pathways of birds that migrate. So as you can see, there's a lot of overlap and they go for a long way. So say a bird catches avian influenza here in Southeast Asia, in Vietnam or Cambodia. It can then migrate up north, cross over into Alaska, where it can interact with a bird that migrates in the Pacific America flyway. And then it would fly down, and down here in South America, it interacts with a bird from the Atlantic Americas of flyway. That bird gets infected, and it gets into that population. They go up here into the Greenland and get into Europe, and birds migrate and interact with other birds, and that's how it spreads. It spreads through these flyways. Most influenza variants travel east to west and south to north, at least in Europe. Yeah, that is a lot where a lot of them, how a lot of them travel. A lot of these avian influenza strains, and a lot of influenza strains in general, it originated, or at least were first identified in China and Southeast Asia, and have spread from there. A lot of it going east, or going west, and then crossing over into the U.S. So the big recent outbreaks over the past couple of years, I did see an article talking about where that came from, and looking at the genetic analysis, it was determined that it came from Europe. It came from Europe, got into Canada, and then got down into the US through that pathway. So it's through these flyways that overlapped and then got into the eastern United States. So this is how it spreads. Yeah. And there's also a possibility that, people ship birds all over the world. So we might be spreading it unknowingly as well in some ways. Oh, whisper. So technically they are China viruses, jokingly. Sure. Jokingly. But yeah. Yeah, that whole deal. Yeah. So any other questions you have about avian influenza at this point before we talk about the history and public health responses? All right, well, I'm not seeing any more. So let's head on. Let's head on to Sarah says you were curious because your son and wife have chickens. Yeah, well, I mean, it could definitely get into those chickens because, a lot of wild birds are infected and, you know, they land in the area where your son and his wife's chickens might be and could infect those chickens. Um, they definitely need to keep an eye out for uh, any potential symptoms of illness in the birds, um, and try to take what precautions they can. At the end of this episode, we will talk about some precautions that they can take. Um, but yeah, it's kind of hard to isolate flocks, even backyard flocks, from wild birds. Wild birds go wherever the heck they want, so it's difficult. It's difficult. So, avian influenza was first described in 1878 in Italy, when a contagious disease with high mortality was seen in poultry. They called it arguably one of the best disease names ever: fowl plague. Fowl being like waterfowl, Foul, plague. But foul plague, sounding like, oh, that's foul. That's one of the best names of any disease I've ever heard. It's even better than Black Death, in my opinion. Foul plague. Why did we change that? We should bring that back. Actually, as a side note, I didn't put this in my script, but I kind of find it funny. But the term foul plague was used up until 1981, even. Why did we get rid of it? Such a good name. Anyway, it wasn't until 1955 that the virus causing this disease was identified as a type A influenza virus. When there have been some very large outbreaks in birds, and many times when it has crossed over into people. So because there are so many incidences of this, especially in birds, I will not go over all of the examples of this, but I will hit a few highlights, particularly those that involve people. And we'll start with the 1918 to 1919 Spanish flu. The Spanish flu killed, original estimates say, between 50 million and 100 million people globally, though more recent estimates put it closer to 17.4 million deaths. So at the time, it killed between 1% and 5.4% of the world. That is massive, massive amount of death. Later research determined that this was an avian-like H1N1 influenza virus, so potentially a bird flu virus. The first outbreak of HPAI in the US occurred in 1924 to 1925. By the 1950s, HPAI had been reported in Europe, Russia, North America, South America, the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. So basically everywhere. Everywhere except for Australia, basically. In 1952, a new strain of avian influenza A, H2N2, was observed circulating in people in East Asia and led to a second major global influenza pandemic. This one killed about 1.1 million people globally. Throughout the 1960s, several LPAI outbreaks were observed in water birds and waterfowl. The third major influenza outbreak since 1900 occurred in 1968 and was caused by the H3N2 strain. This was a new strain that came from the combination of two different avian influenza viruses. About 1 million people worldwide died in this pandemic. In 1983, an LPAI H5N2 virus was circulating in chickens in the US. Unfortunately, this strain evolved into an HPAI virus and caused very high mortality in affected flocks. HPAI H7N3 virus was first identified in poultry in 1994, and both HPAI and LPAI virus types of this strain continue to circulate in birds to this day. 1996 led to the identification of one of the big deal strains that we are dealing with now, H5N1. Ow, my cat's biting my hand. Why are you biting my hand? Yeah, H5N1 identified in 1996. This virus was isolated from farmed geese in southern China. 1 year later, in 1997, large H5N1 outbreaks were seen in poultry in Hong Kong. Unfortunately, 18 people were infected during this outbreak, and 6 died. This was the first recognized human infection of H5N1 and the first human deaths of H5N1. Let's see, there's some questions or some comments. All right, now chickens and turkeys are meant to be under a roof and not free range due to the flu. I mean, that would help. It still wouldn't be perfect, but it definitely would help. Yeah, if they're not free range, that would definitely be a way to help isolate them and protect them from avian influenza, but that can be hard to do, and also it just isn't great for the birds either. So it's hard. I get it. Big Fat Snake says, in Denmark, it's mostly been turkeys that were hit in 2025. And Whisper says, gulls and sparrows in Norway, though Canada geese do bring it as well. Yeah, absolutely. In 2002, HPAI influenza strains were first officially identified in South America, but there had been reports of potential HPAI infections since the early 90s. Also in 2002, one human case of LPAI H7N2 infection occurred in the US. A very large HPAI H7N7 outbreak in 2003 in the Netherlands resulted in the death of 28% of the national chicken population. It also caused 98 human cases and 1 human death. Also in 2003, also in 2003, an H5N1 reemergence in Hong Kong affected wild birds and poultry and killed 2 people. 2004 was a pretty rough year with 2 large outbreaks in the US and Hong Kong, resulting in sporadic human cases with a varying severity of diseases. That same year, the US experienced their first HPAI outbreak in 20 years, and it killed more than 7,000 chickens. Throughout the 2010s, there were many reported avian influenza outbreaks in birds, too many to begin to cover here. There were some that resulted in human infections, including 2 in 2014, 1 in 2015, 2 in 2016, and 1 in 2017. In 2019, a report came out that said between November 2023 and May of 2029, there had been 861 human cases in 17 countries of H5N1 infections, and these resulted in 455 deaths, with a mortality rate of 52.8%. In addition, between 2013 and May of 2019, there were 1,568 cases of H7N9 bird flu in people, and resulted in 612 deaths, or a mortality rate of 36.9%. In addition to the people and birds that were infected, 2016 saw the first identification of avian influenza in cats and in seals. 2020 through 2024 was brutal with the amount of avian influenza outbreaks, the number of species infected, and the number of people infected. For that reason, during this period, I'll stick to just the human cases and the infections of more unusual animals. 2020, HPAI H5N8 infections were detected in swans, seals, and a fox in the UK. 5 human cases of H5N6 were seen in England, a child in Hong Kong, and a child in Hong Kong caught H9N2, as did a child in Senegal and 4 children in China. In 2021, more seals in the in the UK, Germany, and Denmark became infected by a variety of avian influenza strains. Laos first reported the first human cases of H5N6 in a child in 2021 as well. H5N1 infections were detected in foxes in the Netherlands and Estonia in 2021 as well. China reported 2 cases of H10N3, 36 infections of H5N6 that resulted in 18 deaths, as well as 24 infections of H9N2 that resulted in 1 death. All of that in 2021. Just 1 year. 2022 saw H5 infections of raccoons, skunks, minks, foxes, otters, a lynx, a polecat, a badger, raccoon dogs, domestic cats and dogs, tigers, leopards, seals, bears, and more. Throughout that year, at least 35 people, but likely more, became infected, and there were at least 2 deaths. So now that brings us to the current situation from 2024 through January 2026. Avian influenza has been super active globally over the past 2 years, with a particularly large outbreak in the United States. This outbreak was very heavily associated with, with dairy cattle. April 2024 showed the first reported cow-to-human spread of H5N1 bird flu, with more to come over the following months. In 2024, there were 81 reported human cases of HPAI H5N1 influenza, with 67 of them occurring in the US. This map here, shows the reported shows where avian influenza was reported between October 1, 2024 and 30 September 2025. As you can see, it's pretty much global and affecting a wide variety of animals and many different strains of the virus. Now, the areas that aren't marked doesn't mean there wasn't influenza, doesn't mean there was oh my gosh. Just because they aren't marked on the map doesn't mean those areas did not have H5N1 avian influenza in those locations. It just means they weren't tested or they weren't identified there. So, like much of the areas of Africa, the Middle East, and Russia, there likely was H5N1 influenza there as well, but we just don't have test results for those areas. In 2025, there were 31 known human H5N1 cases, and as of August 4th, 11 of them died. I don't have further information about total number of deaths of H5N1 cases in 2025 beyond that. This map, slightly updated, slightly different, shows the location of avian influenza tests between October 2025 and January 22nd, 2026. So during the current wave of avian influenza. As you can see, still pretty much all over the place. Between December 23rd, 2025 and the 22nd of January 2026, there were 1,391 incidences of HPAI avian influenza reported. And this is in all animals. These occurred in 39 cases. In addition to that, there were 3 events of LPAI infection and 6 human cases in just those 10 days. So it's a lot. It's everywhere. It's an issue. Very much an issue. So that is basically the history of avian influenza. This graph shows how many HPAI H5N1 bird flu human cases have been seen since the first one was identified in 1997. Bird flu is everywhere, all the time. And too many people, birds, and other animals are getting affected and dying from this disease. There have been 8 examples of human-to-human transmission of this virus, or of this disease, of these viruses. 2 of these cases had human-to-human-to-human, so 3 generations transmission. But luckily, it hasn't gone beyond that. And to date, there has not been any sustained human-to-human transmission, which is a good thing. And we need to keep it that way. So, with all of this scary information, what does public health do about it? How do we try to prevent avian influenza spread and prevent human cases? Give me 1 second. All right. So, prevention of human cases basically comes down to avoiding exposure to infected animals or infected animal secretions. If you must have direct and close contact with sick or dead birds or other animals, use personal protective equipment or PPE, including disposable gloves, protective shoe covers or boots, head cover or hair covers, fluid-resistant clothing like long-sleeve coveralls, safety goggles, and potentially, if needed, respirators. The link in the middle of this website, or the link in the middle of this picture here, takes you to a website with more information about the use and applicability of personal protective information. This isn't applicable or necessary for most people, but if you work with poultry, dairy cows, or have other high-risk jobs, this might be nice or even necessary for you to know. So please check it out. Other preventative measures and recommendations include not touching contaminated or potentially contaminated surfaces or materials such as animal litter or bedding materials, and don't touch or consume raw milk or raw milk products. Cleaning and disinfecting of surfaces and equipment is important to kill the viruses that may be on them. And of course, the best, most effective public health prevention, disease prevention method out there is wash your hands. Wash your hands. After you touch something that could be nasty, wash your hands, especially before you touch your face. Do it. Washing hands is good. Warning, there is about to be a picture of dead birds here shortly. Meaning right now. Nope, not now. Not yet. Coming up. Coming up soon. I'll let you know. That'll be the next picture. Got out of order. Or I thought I was... Yeah. Anyway. How do we try to prevent avian influenza in animals? This is a bit difficult, but it is something that we try to do. Oh, hey, Matt. Matt says, used to teach, if you're not washing your hands, wash your hands. If you're washing your hands, wash your hands. Yeah. No, the slides didn't get messed up. I just got mixed up in the order. I put that line in the script a bit too early. It's before the next picture. So I think I'm not positive. We'll see. But yes, wash your hands. If you're not washing your hands, wash your hands. If you're washing your hands, wash your hands more frequently. But yeah, prevention methods in animals include surveillance and various One Health strategies. I know I talked a little bit about One Health in a previous video, but we will do a full episode on One Health eventually. But that is basically the integration of animal health, environmental health, and human health, because they all are all very closely related and tied to each other. So we conduct virological surveillance of the environment, including lakes, agricultural areas, sewage systems, and animal products. We also screen animals, including wild birds, stray animals, poultry, and livestock, as well as conduct screenings in people, both at-risk populations and the general public. This helps us with our awareness of what is around and gives us methods for early detection of outbreaks. Public health agencies are working to develop targeted public health messaging to make those at highest risk aware of the situation and make them aware of these prevention methods. The U.S. Food and Drug Agency, or FDA, is working on a five-pronged strategy to combat avian influenza and lower egg prices in the U.S. Oh, what is going on with my pictures? So yeah, apparently my pictures got all out of order or something. Not sure exactly what happened. But anyway, yeah. So these measures from the FDA are aimed at preventing bird flu and include strategies of strengthening biosecurity measures and increasing assessment. They also are working on investing $100 million in avian influenza research and vaccine development. Some nations have established multi-sectoral government coordination structures that include agriculture, health, environment, and private sector. These structures work to improve communication, allow for integrated surveillance, develop cross-training programs, and develop national wildlife contingency plans. In January of 2025, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services allocated $306 million toward avian influenza. This was and is being used to strengthen monitoring, training healthcare professionals to be able to provide rapid response, and increasing the stockpile of antiviral medications and PPE, as well as educating the public on preventative measures. Oh, no, oh, crap. Here's going to be the picture of dead birds. Just a warning. Here it is. In addition to these monitoring efforts, we implement early control measures. Culling or depopulating affected animals and affected populations to help prevent the spread. And we are working on developing vaccines for H5, H7, and H9 influenza strains. So far, there have been 3 H5N1 vaccines licensed in the US, with others approved by the European Medical Association. Currently, however, as of 2025, Finland is the only country to offer vaccines to high-risk individuals. Other countries, including the US, have stockpiles of these vaccines in case they become necessary. Like if it becomes more of a risk to human populations. Big Fat Snake says they're working on vaccines for turkeys coming up in autumn of 2026. Yes, we are working on vaccines for birds as well as people. Absolutely. And as just mentioned, still more vaccines are being developed in hopes of better protecting at-risk people and birds. As this virus circulates, more and more mammal species, it gains mutations that allow it to become more stable and transmit easier among mammals. This increases the risk for humans. So the picture of the dead birds has been taken down. Therefore, these surveillance, monitoring, and prevention programs are of critical importance. These public health efforts need to be well and fully funded. Scientists, the scientists, epidemiologists, veterinarians, laboratorians, and other public health workers that work to protect from these horrible diseases need the support of the public and of the government to be fully effective. So please tell your governments public health is important. With that, I will stop here to see if you have any questions or comments about avian influenza. So, what do you got? Any questions about avian influenza? Any questions? Any concerns? Any comments? I hope I didn't make you too scared. That was not my intention here. But yeah, let me know. Let me know if you have anything. Any comments? Anything. Avian influenza is a really nasty disease. As an epidemiologist, it's one of the ones that scares me the most. Again, I'm not saying this to scare you, but I think it's one that has the most potential to become to go pandemic, and if it does, it could be really nasty. But yeah, that's why we're working hard on this. Sarah, does this affect other domestic or farm animals besides cows? Yes, absolutely. So the farm animals that I know that it affects are cows and of course poultry, birds, farmed chicken, turkeys, geese, ducks, etc. As far as other domestic animals, um, domestic cats and dogs have been infected by it. But just a huge variety of wild animals have also been infected. This affects basically everything. What about goats? I didn't ever see any reports about avian influenza in goats, but let's see what Google says. Let's see. Let's see. Turn this on. Well, here is HPAI and livestock information for small ruminants, goats and sheep and camelid stakeholders. Has HPAI ever been detected in small ruminants? Yes, March 2024. HPAI was detected in young goat kids in Minnesota. Has it been affected in camelids? Yes. Also in May of 2024. So yeah, can infect goats and camels. Yeah. What about horses? Don't know. Another one didn't see that on any list. Let's see. Let's see. So this article is testing whether horses are susceptible. By infecting horse trachea epithelial cells. And infecting ponies. And it looks like these cells show. It's hard to tell. They kind of had inconclusive results. I don't know what Epub management website is. I don't know if this is at all legit at all. But it looks like there are surveillance strategies in horses to see. So they do get influenza. So there's an equine strain of influenza identified in 1963. But this doesn't seem to show any evidence of infection of avian influenza in horses. Wait, here we go. Evidence of influenza H5N1 spillover infections in horses. Recent outbreak of influenza affects many mammal species. Okay, this is just talking about. Yeah, they report serologic evidence of H5N1 infection in horses. So potentially, it looks like they might. So this is just serological evidence, meaning they detected antibodies to that virus in the horse blood or horse serum. Doesn't show that they found the virus or that there were symptoms. It just means that they were infected by that, not necessarily that they got the disease. They may have fought off the virus before it took hold. But yeah, so maybe. It's a non-zero possibility of that. Whisper. So animal to human transmission is next to zero, but never zero. So it is low. It is difficult. I wouldn't necessarily go as far to say as it is next to zero. I mean, there were, thousands of confirmed HPAI, H5N1, and what was it, H7N9, or whatever it was that I said, avian influenza infections just in the past couple of decades. But so the animal to human transmission does happen, and those are just the ones that we know about. Those are just the ones that are confirmed. Again, there might have been more. There likely were more that are where people were asymptomatic or just had very minor symptoms. So it does happen, but human to human transmission is next to zero. That is very, very rare. So that's arguably the most important thing at this point, especially for the risk for potential pandemic. But yeah, very good questions. Thank you. Any other last minute questions that you might have? I'll give another 30 seconds or so for you to type any other questions. If not, you'll have to type them in the comments afterwards. All right, well, I'm not seeing anything, so let's go ahead and finish off this episode. So I know that bird flu has been in the news a lot over the past couple of years, and sounds very scary. And that's rightfully so. It is a very scary disease. I agree with you. I agree with it completely. However, I do not want what I said here to make you more worried than you already are. In fact, what I'm trying to do here is hopefully make you less worried. Because unless you have close contact with birds, especially prolonged close contact with birds, you are not likely not to be affected. And if you do deal with birds a lot, like if you have chickens or something, or if you work in the industry where you deal with birds, or if you work on a farm that has birds or cows, there are things you can do about it. There are a lot of preventative measures that can protect you. It might be hard to protect your flock, it might be hard to protect your livestock, but you can protect yourself from becoming infected. Limit your contact with sick or dead animals and birds. Yes, save the birds. We need tendies and nuggies. Yes, absolutely. But yeah, limit your contact with sick or dead animals. If you do have to have contact with animals that look sick or have died, use PPE, wear masks, wear eye protection, gloves, coveralls, wash your hands. Most importantly, for everyone, especially the general public, don't touch wild animals. Whether they're alive or dead, do not touch them. This goes for all animals, not just birds, not just the ones that look sick. Don't touch wild animals. It's not good for them. It's not good for you. It increases your risk for spread of disease, not just avian influenza, but lots of other diseases that they may carry. Do not touch wild animals. Please, don't. And everyone, I want you to remember that there are lots of very hardworking epidemiologists, disease investigators, and other public health personnel that are doing everything that they can to prevent you from being affected by this nasty disease. So with that, I want to thank you all for joining me today. If you have any additional questions or comments that I have not yet answered, please leave them in the comments and I'll get to them as soon as I can. So the next episode will be a fun one. It'll be a really fun one. I will be taking a break from public health information or education and from disease investigation, and I will be not live streaming. But I will be posting a video. And in this video, I will be reviewing the 2011 movie Contagion. And I'm going to see how good it is, how accurate it is regarding diseases and public health. So it will be a lot of fun. So be sure to subscribe here on YouTube so that you don't miss that video or any of my future content. And also follow me on Bluesky, where I share lots of disease and public health news and information between episodes. You can find the link in the description. So I want you to remember to stay healthy, stay happy, and remember, public health is for the good of everybody. I'll see you next time.